In September 1972, Boeing signed a $150 million deal, landing its first 10 jets in China, just weeks after Nixon's groundbreaking handshake in Beijing. Washington thought it was creating an ally, and Beijing saw an open classroom. By the mid-1990s, 8 out of 10 Chinese jets wore Boeing's name. But as Boeing trained thousands of aviation professionals and shipped parts worth billions of dollars, a secret clone appeared in Shanghai, a copy built from spare parts. Why did Boeing, against all logic, arm its greatest rival? The answer begins with a contract and ends with a crisis no one saw coming. Negotiators from Boeing and the Chinese government met in the summer of 1972, just months after President Nixon's historic visit to Beijing. 5 months of back and forth ended with a contract for 10 Boeing 707 jets and 40 Pratt & Whitney engines, all for $150 million. The deal was more than a sale. It was an opening. U.S. officials saw it as a way to pull China away from Soviet aircraft, but for Boeing, it was an entry into a market that had been closed for decades. Boeing's teams did not just deliver airplanes, they set up training programs in Seattle, bringing Chinese pilots, mechanics, and air traffic controllers to the United States. A flight school rose in Shanghai, staffed by American instructors, its curriculum based on Boeing's own procedures. The goal was clear: teach China to fly and maintain American jets, ensuring reliance on U.S. technology for years to come. By the mid-1990s, the strategy seemed to pay off. 8 out of 10 jets flying in China bore the Boeing logo. 80% of new orders landed in Boeing's books. The company had become a fixture in Chinese aviation, its trainers and manuals shaping the next generation of pilots and engineers. But beneath the surface, Chinese officials were charting a different course. In May 1980, a group of American visitors touring a Shanghai factory stumbled upon something unexpected. On the tarmac stood a large jet, nearly identical to the Boeing 707s delivered years before. The aircraft, named Yun-10, was powered by Pratt & Whitney engines originally supplied as spare parts under the 1972 contract. U.S. diplomats quickly realized what had happened. China had reverse-engineered the 707, using American know-how and components to build its own prototype. Declassified cables from that year show a quiet alarm spreading through Washington and Boeing's executive offices. The technology transfer meant to create a loyal customer had instead produced an unexpected rival. The lesson was clear, but the sales and the training continued. Boeing's relationship with China deepened in unexpected ways through the 1980s and the 1990s. What began as a strategy to secure sales soon evolved into a complex system of outsourcing and local production. By 1980, Boeing was sourcing key components, vertical fins, horizontal stabilizers, and cargo doors from Chinese state-owned factories. The logic was simple: lower costs, faster deliveries, and a foothold in a growing market. But each new contract expanded China's role in Boeing's global supply chain. The scale of this partnership grew rapidly. In 1990, China placed a $9 billion order for new aircraft, instantly making it one of Boeing's largest customers. By 1993, China accounted for nearly 1/6 of Boeing's global sales. The company's dependence on Chinese manufacturing became embedded in its business model, with procurement ledgers showing more than $200 million spent annually on parts and services sourced from China. In 1999, Boeing launched a joint venture in Tianjin with Aviation Industries of China. The Tianjin Composites facility began producing advanced components for nearly every Boeing model: the 737, the 747, the 767, the 777, and later, the 787 Dreamliner. Over time, this plant would expand to supply more than 10,000 Boeing aircraft worldwide. Boeing's own figures show that by 2024, every jet rolling off its assembly lines contained Chinese-made parts. The workforce pipeline was just as significant. Boeing invested in training more than 27,000 Chinese aviation professionals, from engineers to quality inspectors. Former CEO Phil Condit once explained the approach. The trick is to give something away, just as you are developing something better. The idea was to protect core technology by outsourcing only what was considered non-essential. Yet, with each new transfer, each set of blueprints, each training session, China's technical capacity grew. By the early 2000s, Boeing's annual contribution to China's economy exceeded $1.5 billion. The company had become the largest foreign customer of Chinese aerospace parts, and its operations supported thousands of jobs across the country. What began as a calculated move for market access had quietly created a dependency. The cost savings were real, but so was the leverage now held by Beijing. In May 2008, the Chinese government launched the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, known as COMAC, with a single purpose: to end the dominance of Boeing and Airbus in the country's skies. The official budget for COMAC's new jet, the C919, was set at $9.5 billion. In reality, the project would consume more than twice that amount, with estimates of total state support ranging from $49 to $72 billion. The scale of investment made clear that this was not a commercial gamble, but a national mission. To build an airliner that could compete with Western giants, COMAC needed more than money. It needed expertise. Chinese recruiters scoured the global aviation industry, offering salaries twice as high as prevailing rates and generous housing packages. Engineers who had worked on Boeing and Airbus programs were lured to Shanghai with promises of rapid advancement and the chance to shape a new national champion. Many accepted, bringing with them not only technical skills, but first-hand knowledge of Western design and certification processes. Matt Pottinger, a former U.S. official, described China's approach bluntly. He said, "If you want to sell to 1.3 billion people, you are going to have to give us the blueprints." That logic shaped every negotiation. Western suppliers who wanted a piece of the Chinese market found themselves required to transfer technology, train local engineers, and sometimes share sensitive design data. The result was a supply chain that looked global on paper, but served a single purpose: to accelerate China's learning curve. The C919's maiden flight took place on May 5, 2017, 3 years behind schedule. But the aircraft that rolled out onto the tarmac was not the product of a closed ecosystem. Its parts list revealed the paradox at the heart of China's aviation ambitions. 48 American companies supplied key systems from avionics to landing gear. 26 European firms contributed everything from flight controls to cabin interiors. Only 14 Chinese suppliers were involved in the first production run. Even the jet's engines, the LEAP 1C, were built by CFM International, a joint venture between General Electric and Safran, with the engine core manufactured in Ohio. A CSIS analyst summed up the situation. The C919 is fundamentally a non-Chinese airplane adorned with Chinese paint. Yet the logic of state investment and relentless learning was hard to ignore. Subsidies and recruitment were not about immediate self-sufficiency. They were about absorbing every lesson, every process, every shortcut, until the next generation of engineers could do it themselves. In 2008, Airbus took a step that would permanently alter the balance of power in China's aviation market. The company opened a full-scale final assembly line in Tianjin, the first of its kind in Asia, designed to build A320 family jets from start to finish on Chinese soil. This was not a symbolic gesture. The Tianjin facility was the product of years of negotiation between Airbus executives and Chinese procurement officials, who insisted that true partnership meant real manufacturing jobs, not just imported aircraft. The stakes were clear. Any company willing to localize production would find itself first in line for orders from China's state-owned airlines. The Tianjin line began with modest ambitions, but its output grew rapidly. By December 2025, Airbus had delivered its 800 aircraft from Tianjin, transforming the city into an essential hub in the company's global network. The expansion did not stop there. In October 2025, Airbus inaugurated a second assembly line in Tianjin, covering 300,000 square meters and doubling the site's production capacity. The company's target is ambitious. By 2027, Tianjin is expected to produce 20% of the world's A320s, contributing to a global goal of 75 aircraft per month. This deep localization paid off. As Airbus ramped up its Chinese output, the company's share of new aircraft orders in China surged. By 2019, Airbus had overtaken Boeing in Chinese orders for the first time. By 2025, Airbus claimed 55% of the market, while Boeing's presence dwindled to less than 5%. Every milestone at Tianjin translated into fresh contracts as Chinese airlines and leasing companies placed ever larger orders to support local production. For Airbus, the Tianjin strategy was more than just an operational decision. It was a bet that Chinese policymakers would reward those who invested in the country's industrial base. The numbers tell the story: 800 aircraft delivered, 2 assembly lines running at full tilt, and a market share that left its American rival in the dust. The lesson repeated in every procurement meeting was unmistakable. In China, the path to dominance runs through local assembly lines, not distant factories. Inside a nondescript office building in Jiangsu province, a Chinese intelligence officer named Xu Yanjun used LinkedIn and encrypted email to reach out to engineers at GE Aviation and Safran. His targets worked on composite fan blades and turbine technology for the LEAP-1C engine, the heart of the C919. From 2010 to 2015, Xu and his team operated under the codename Turbine Panda, posing as recruiters or research partners. They offered speaking opportunities and all-expenses-paid trips to China, luring insiders into meetings where laptops were quietly cloned and confidential files copied. The Department of Justice would later reveal that Xu's operation was anything but amateur. He coordinated with 2 state-owned aerospace companies directly involved in the C919's development, requesting technical manuals, design blueprints, and proprietary test data. The goal was clear: close the gap between China's ambitions and Western engineering. According to a cybersecurity analyst at CrowdStrike, Turbine Panda saved COMAC several years of research and billions of dollars in development costs. The stolen files included critical details on the LEAP-1C's composite blades, a technology that took GE and Safran decades to perfect. In October 2018, Belgian authorities arrested Xu Yanjun as he waited to meet a GE engineer. Extradited to the United States, he became the first Chinese intelligence official ever tried on American soil for corporate espionage. The sentencing memo left little doubt about the scale of the operation. Xu was acting as part of a broader economic strategy to accelerate China's rise at the expense of its competitors. In November 2022, Xu received a 20-year prison sentence. For DOJ prosecutors and cybersecurity experts, the case proved that state-backed espionage had become a central tool in China's quest to build a homegrown jetliner and to challenge Boeing and Airbus on the world stage. The first C919 entered commercial service with China Eastern Airlines in December 2022, flying from Shanghai to Beijing just months later. By January 2026, only 26 C919s had been delivered, fewer than what Airbus produces in Tianjin in a single month. For every C919 that rolled out, the heart of the aircraft, the LEAP-1C engine core, traveled halfway around the world from a factory in Ohio. The engine's advanced composite fan blades and turbine technology, once the target of state-sponsored espionage, remained beyond China's reach for mass production. This reliance became a pressure point. In May 2025, U.S. authorities suspended export licenses for the LEAP-1C engine core destined for COMAC. The move was not announced with fanfare, but its effects were immediate. C919 production lines in Shanghai slowed to a crawl as finished jets sat idle, waiting for the one component China could not replace. Export documents stalled in Washington, while COMAC officials scrambled for alternatives. The suspension lasted just 2 months. In July 2025, the U.S. quietly lifted the ban and shipments resumed, but the message was clear. As long as the C919 depends on a single American-made engine core, its fate is not fully in Chinese hands. Policy officials in both countries understood what the numbers showed. One export decision in Ohio could ground an entire fleet. Engine program managers inside COMAC faced a reality they could not engineer away. The CJ1000A, China's homegrown alternative, remained years from certification. Even optimistic projections placed mass production beyond 2030. For now, the promise of an independent jetliner was undermined by a single American choke point. The lessons from espionage and reverse engineering had limits, no matter how many blueprints changed hands. On April 15, 2025, China's aviation regulator halted all Boeing deliveries. For Boeing, the consequences were immediate and severe. 55 completed jets, including the 737 MAX, sat in storage, undelivered and unwanted. 222 additional orders, worth an estimated $12.2 billion, were frozen in Boeing's backlog, with no clear path to revenue. The financial pressure was compounded by tariffs. A single 737 MAX, once priced at $55 million, now cost Chinese airlines more than $120 million after a 125% import duty. The math was simple. Every Boeing sale to China became a losing proposition. Boeing's delivery volume to China had already collapsed. Between 2015 and 2020, the company shipped 668 aircraft to Chinese customers. From 2020 to March 2025, that number fell to just 109, a drop of 84%. The company's China market share, once dominant, slipped below 5%. Since 2018, Boeing has reported $51 billion in operating losses, a figure that reflects not only the loss of Chinese orders, but also the wider impact of trade disputes, safety crises, and shifting global demand. Meanwhile, COMAC's order book continued to swell. By January 2026, the C919 had secured more than 1,000 orders, almost all from Chinese airlines and state-backed leasing companies. In November 2025, the Chinese government injected $6.2 billion in new capital into COMAC, nearly doubling its registered capital and signaling full state support for the program. The C919's list price, between $99 million and $108 million, matched its Western rivals, but COMAC offered faster delivery slots and the promise of independence from foreign suppliers. European regulators are expected to certify the C919 between 2028 and 2031, opening doors to international markets. Michael O'Leary, CEO of Ryanair, has suggested he would consider the C919 if it comes in 10 to 20% cheaper than the Airbus A320neo. For now, the C919's future hinges on engine supply and certification, but the balance of power in the world's largest aviation market has already shifted. Boeing, once the gatekeeper, now finds itself on the outside, watching as China's homegrown competitor takes flight. The world's largest aviation market now builds its own jets, funded by decades of Western know-how. As China races to finish its homegrown engine, the last American leverage fades. Boeing's story warns that technology handed over today becomes tomorrow's competition. The next time a nation asks for blueprints, the real question is, who will be flying who? Share your thoughts in the comments below.